A very good evening, Zimbabwe. You are listening to Studio 7 from the Voice of America on Wednesday, July 22nd, 2015. And this is Live Talk. I'm Blessing Zulu.
And I'm Gibbs Dube.
And tonight on Live Talk, we are continuing with our discussion of the retrenchment, or better, we can put it like massive retrenchment of workers following a Supreme Court ruling that sided with the employers.
To join the discussion, phone us directly at this number 001-202-619-2077 and we'll call you back.
Live Talk goes out to Zimbabwe on our 909 medium wave frequency and on the 4930-5940 and 15460 kilohertz shortwave Monday through Friday at 8:30 p.m.
On the internet, you can find us at www.voazimbabwe.com, www.voashona.com and www.voindebele.com.
We want a win-win situation. When we are talking about tripartism, it's equality. Not that one is a master of the other one. The judgment is being reviewed by the Attorney General and the other legal departments within government, and we will come up with a position shortly.
Siyaphambili lokho okwenzwa ngabaqhashi kuyasimangalisa ukuthi indaba bekwenza ngodlakela olunje bagijimelani kathi into njengoba isebenza kade kwesilazo nje isikhathi sonke lesi kuyasimangalisa lapho ikho nje sizama ukuthi uhulumende ngangenelana ngesiphatha
tirikuti kuvana vezimbabwe kuvashandi vezimbabwe kuruzhinji rwezimbabwe rusununguko rwenyu hamungamiriri kuti zvibve kumatare, hamungamiriri kuti zvibve kuhurumende kuna president. Ini pachenyu ndimunofanirwa kuramba semaramiro amakaita muna 97, 98, 99, 2000 mukadaro munosununguka.
Once again, thanks for joining us. You are listening to Studio 7 Live Talk. And tonight on Live Talk, we are talking about the labor crisis in the country.
Labor organizations are claiming that there have been massive retrenchments since Friday, when the Supreme Court ruled that employees' contracts can be terminated once they are given a 3-month notice. Official figures say 850 workers have been fired so far.
Labor leaders are pleading with President Robert Mugabe to intervene and try to stop the hemorrhage. The Employers Confederation of Zimbabwe and the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, while welcoming the judgment, are disputing labor claims that there is a firing spree.
What do you think about this issue? If you wish to join the show right now, phone us directly at this number 001-202-619-2077 and we'll call you back. That number again, 001-202-619-2077. Yeah, blessing.
Of course, we initially pointed out there that it was about 850 workers, but news that we are reporting, we are just receiving, is that Sino Zim, a cotton company, has actually retrenched 400 workers today, and we'll be talking to some workers about that developing situation. So that puts the number well above 1,000, almost 1,300 workers have been retrenched since Friday after this ruling gives.
Ibombe Rwanda basizwile ke ukuthi lamhlanje ke kulabantu abanengi asebexoxwe imisebenzi. Singathi ke sebanengi kakhulu bangafika i850 abangani baxoxwe imisebenzi kususela ngolesihlanu kuze kube lesinqumo esivela emthethwandaba eSupreme Court. Esithi umuntu ke nxa elomuntu wakhe omsebenzelayo ulakho ukuthi athi hamba ngikhaya saphela sikubone kodwa emnike inyanga ezintathu ukuthi chiya umsebenzi. Sizwile njalo nokuthi ke abantu abakhangele ezezisebenzi bathi konokho kungani kuyahlupha ngoba abantu sebephonga uxoxwa, umuntu angaphonga uvuka esithi zibanibana usela umsebenzi uyathi tshona phansi hamba. So ke kanya kuyahlupha kakhulu blessing.
Onguka hamadzadiwa tira kuti titarise mamiriro akaita zvinhu kumishando uko kwatiri kudzwa kuti vashandi vakawanda vari kugumurwa mabasa zvichitevera mutongo akapiwa nedare repamusoro resupreme court wekuti vashandi vanokwanisa kugumurwa pamabasa vasina chavakabata ndokunge vapiwa mwedzi mitatu. Of course, the news that we are receiving is that Sino Zimbabwe, a joint venture between Zimbabwe and China, has actually retrenched 400 workers today. 400 workers have been laid off by this company. And of course, this Sino Zimbabwe cotton opened in 2013, and it was actually commissioned by President Robert Mugabe himself, flanked by the then Vice President Joyce Mujuru. And it was said at the time that it was worth 17 million rather. They said the plant and ginnery, which is near Hopley in Harare, was worth 17 million. And of course, now there's this development. And Gibbs, I think we are lucky. One of our guests is from that company and has been affected. And that is Mr. Maxwell Moyo, a worker at Sino Zim. Mr. Moyo, good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for joining us. Gibbs, you can start the ball rolling.
Mr. Moyo, can you tell us about what is going on, at Sino Zimbabwe?
Yeah, in Sino Zimbabwe, all permanent workers has been retrenched. The human resources manager just came yesterday in the late hours and addressed all the workers that all permanent workers tomorrow you have to come at 8 o'clock. Since we have been going there, we have been working through shifts. We have been working in 12 hours every day, starting at 6 and exchanging at 6. So we have been all shifts has been ordered to come at 8 o'clock. And when we reached there at the command today, we were all locked outside the gate, and we have been addressed by the managers that the company is closed and all the permanent workers are not going in, and we have been given all the termination papers that was describing the issue of termination, and they just listed only 3 issues that the company is no longer going to is now not able to hold the amount of the workers that are working at the company, and the company is closing. So they said they are going to give us only 3 months notice pay, and only going to pay our leave days and the overtime, and that is what has transpired in the company. And this shocked all the workers, since the company has started changing people last year, and all those who have been affected since last year were getting their monies as per negotiations. Now, those who are affected today, including myself, we have been told that I think they have taken the advantage of the ruling that has been transpired at the Supreme Court.
Yes.
So we reported the matter. We reported the matter to the NEC, NEC, the organization that represents the workers at textiles, since all the Sinosm is a textile industry and a ginnery industry.
And any retrenchment packages that you are being given, you said that most of the workers were actually permanently employed. Did they talk about any retrenchment package?
No, they said we are just, the paper is just mentioning three months notice that we are going to be paid our this month's pay plus a 3 months pay package.
Can you confirm that it's actually 400 workers who have been retrenched, as is being reported?
Yes, it's actually 400 workers, and I think because these are the only workers who are there at the complex so far. But outside, we've got the company's got lots more than that number outside because it buys cotton in the regions, and all those guys are being affected also, and we don't know the actual number there in the regions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moyo. Please do stay on the line. Ramba and Parnari Gibbs. We have our second guest.
Yes, I think we're joined by Mr. Davis and Mr. Spanda, who is a leper expert based in Bulawayo. Mr. Spanda, good evening and welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Spanda, you know, there are these massive job losses or job cuts. So at the end of the day, as a labor expert, what do you think about all this?
Well, what I think, first of all, is that a legal decision was made by judges. And that legal decision actually shows some weakness in our labor legislation. And we naturally have to address that, because what it is actually doing is it is actually giving an employers a license to actually terminate contracts without actually a measure of fairness with the workers, because ordinarily the employer and the worker have always been equal partners. I'm sure you are clear with what I mean there. So there are a number of things that can be done, but they take time, and employers will have actually terminated quite a number of contracts. You will recognize that for a long time employers have said retrenchment costs and procedures are very expensive, and they militate against the termination of contracts. That is why they are actually having salary arrears and many other things, because they are failing to go for retrenchment. So for many employers whose businesses are struggling, that is a cheap way of retrenching, albeit very immoral, very cruel to the worker that cannot actually be denied. So I think this is going to continue for a while until we get to a point where the tripartite parties actually agree to a solution. If you look at how it can be corrected or dealt with, it can only be dealt with through an act of parliament. Some have suggested that presidential powers be invoked. I want to confess, with the new constitution, I haven't had an opportunity to look at the presidential powers, whether they can actually be applied here to actually put the brakes on this on what is happening now.
Kodwa ke nxa ukhangele baba khonapho Sibanda ubona zani kumele kwenziweni okwamanje kungakayenzwa khonapho ngani ucabanga ngakho?
Okwamanje mina engikubonayo ukuthi ukukhala akuncedi, ngoba ama processes lawa aza continue esenziwa ngama employers. Okuqhakathekileyo ukuthi ama employers lama unions le government bathi start engagement to actually find a solution to the problem, and the solution is not going to come overnight. By the time the solution is found, izisebenzi eziningi ziyabe sezilahlekelwe imisebenzi, lokho asoze sikubalekele la nxa kubuhlungu, but nxa beqala manje abaningi abazukulahlekelwa imisebenzi. Njalo kufanele futhi ukuthi abantu bakunanzelele ukuthi umthetho lo awunikanga abantu imvumo yokuphongwenza ama employers imvumo yokwenza umathanda, ngoba lapho umuntu okumele kulandelwe khona ama dismissal procedures, ama code of conduct lokunye okunjalo, umthetho lokhu khonapho. Ungaza umuntu ehonile uthi wena uzamnika inotice ahambe, kungajika kumphendukela umqhathi futhi kusasa. Kungaza ke ukuthi nxa kuvele kukhanya ukuthi lapha kumele kuretrenchwe, uthi wena uzanika inotice, umthetho uzabuya ubuye phezulu kwakho futhi. So abaqhathi kumele bakunanzelele ukuthi yinto entsha, yinto engabancedisa ukureduce ama labor costs. Kungaba lo mvuzo ongamuhle kusasa, ngoba okokuqala vele ibizo likamqhathi liyalimala uma uphokuxotsha abantu abaningi on notice. Izisebenzi ezisalayo zisala zethukile, ukusebenza kwazo kuba zima zisiya phambili, ngoba wonke umuntu usesebenzela evalweni. Izinto eziyama workers committee kakusasebenzi, ngoba ungaze ube khona ku workers committee sokumele unanzelele ukuthi ungakhuluma into engayisiyo uyavuka unikwe inotice kusasa. So ukunceda kwama-workers committee kubudlelwano komqhathi lesisebenzi kuza kuba zima.
Yes, ubambe umlomo khonapho. Siyabonga kakhulu ke Sibanda ungayikatshana. So what Mr. Sibanda is saying is that that kind of Supreme Court ruling actually nullified what can be done by workers' committees. So he says is rendering them extremely ineffective because somebody can be fired anytime, and yeah.
As has been happening now. Regatiende kumtereri wekutanga mkoma Timothy Makadi.
Yebo, Makadi ngoma jongo.
Ndivazulu tiripo yedu tipe ufungwa dzenyu.
Nyaya yekutaura kai inorwadza. Vanhu vanogara vachiudzwa nevanhu kuti gentlemen iyi mhuka iripo iyi kai inoda kutodya nevana vayo chaivo nemabhonzo kushaya kuti vana vayo vari kupi. Isi tiri kuti vashandi pachavo ngavazvimirire zvekuti gavhumende iri kudii. Iyo gavhumende yachonaka iyo ukaona Supreme Court yotaura zvairi kutaura izvi inenge yatobvako kuna ana Mugabe kwese ikoko yapedza, hapana chainombovhunduka. Isi tiri kuti isu vashandi pachedu tikasaona zvokuita, tikasamira isu pachedu, hapana, tinongochema tichingozhamba kusvika vanhu vanyarara, nekuti vanhu vese ivava vari pamabasa ava hapana chavari kutambira, asi takangonyarara. Vane zuro vanhu vari kubviswa mumavheranda mavari tsvaga chokuraramisa, takangonyarara. Handizivi kuti takaitwa sei kana tinosvika rini takangodai zvatiri kuita izvi. Vashandi ngatisimuke tese tivaratidze kuti no, isusu taneta nezvamuri kutiita izvi. Iyo vari kuziva vachiguta, vana vavo vari kudzidza kunze kwenyika, isu vedu kutoti vaone sadzi chaivo havatodi, vada kuti vaone vachingomuka vakafa mangwana chaivo chaivo.
Aiwa, tinotenda zvikuru mukoma Timothy nekupinda muchirongwa chedu. Tinotenda zvikuru. Essentially what Timothy is saying is that the government has failed the people and the workers must not expect the current government to do anything for them. It's up to the workers to demand their rights. Edmo Gono mwemterero makadi mkoma Edmo.
Ndofara makadi mkoma jongo.
Aiwa, ndimkoma Zulu makadi mkoma Edmo.
Aiwa, ndofara hangu makadi.
Tiripo tipe ufungwa dzenyu.
Nyaya iripo iyi ndinoona iri ganga idzakuto iyi mhezi yekumusana.
Mhezi yavavira mudumbu kwete yekumusana. Kumusana futi hauzokwanise kukwenya futi.
Hauikwenyi.
Okay.
Ndinoona marongerwo akaitwa nyaya iyi, vanhu vari kuchema kuti dai vaMugabe yapinzira vanokwanisa kupinzira zvavo vaMugabe, asi hakuna chakataurwa chavasingazivi vaMugabe. Nekuti tikada kutarisa iye zvinezvi tiri kuona kuti ava dzinonguva vanotonga nyaya ava vanozotura nyaya yavo asi inenge yabvako kumatare ekumusoro ikoko kaita sekuvana ana Mugabe ikoko. Ndichidero nekuti iko zvinezvi tikada kutarisa tinoona kuti makambani mazhinji asara muZimbabwe ari kutungamirwa nayo vanotonga mhosva ikoko kubva kunana Supreme Court ikoko ndo vane makambani. Saka havakaturi mitemo inozovaremera mangwana, vatotura mitemo inovarerukira kuti kana ivo vodzinga vashandivo zvinovarerukira. Hati munozviona. Saka hatiregei kuchema kuti deitadai. Ndogona kurogwa nemapurisa tiri mustrichi muzama kuti ngatiratidzire. Zvikatozonyenya kupinza nzara. Dzimba dzedu uko tasimba tavharirwa mumajezi.
Aiwa, tinotenda zvikuru vaGono nekupinda muchirongwa chedu.
Aiwa, ndatenda hangu.
Of course, Mr. Gono is saying the problem is that maybe some of the judges and people involved in policy making are actually business persons themselves. They are employing workers. And it will be difficult to expect them to make laws that might contradict their own personal interests. Gibbs.
Very, very interesting there. Eh? So I think we've got some messages on Facebook, and one of them is from Joseph. Opindo wasitumezela njalo laku WhatsApp. uJoseph ke uthi kodwa lokhu asebekwenzile sebebulala ilizwe sokuzatshontshwa kuma-company ngoba umuntu uyabe sefuna ukuzizamela ukwenza athenga imali. Then kuzobuya ke umnumzana M Yalala Siphepha ubhala esithi sithwele nzima ngabantu abangelanzwelo manje kuyasala bani ema-industry nxa abantu sebeqotshwa ngale ndlela and bangene ngaphi lokhu lakuma-vendors siyaxotshwa futhi ilizwe leli lizabuswa zinyoni sishwashwa sibili. What he's saying there is, people are having a difficult time in Zimbabwe, and even vendors are being chased around. So where should people go from now? That's what his kind of query. Then I've got Mr. Ngube, who writes, "Loku konke akulunganga. Sibona ngazani ibandla le-ZANU-PF yilo elincindezela abantu." So he says all this is not too good. So he believes that ZANU-PF is actually oppressing people.
Rega tidzokere kuna vamoyo mushandi weku Sino Zim kuno gaiwa donjo kukotonuku vamoyo mungatiudza kuti imi mune mhuri yakakura zvakadii uye matambira sei zvamangosvika mukanzi basa rapera?
Ini ndine vana vatatu. Patasvika tikanzi basa rapera zvinhu zvazvina kuti gutsa noti hatisinga expecte zvinhu zvakadaro. Plus nemhuri dzedu vazhinji vevashandi vane maloans avakanga vakatora kumabhanks kwavo. Vazhinji vevashandi vane ma-funeral policies. Takatarisa mari iri kutaurwa nekambani ikeyi kuuraya mhuri dzedu nekuuraya vanhu vazhinji. Saka hazvina kugamuchirika, vanhu tese hazvina kutiitira zvakanaka, zvatirwadza kusvika taedzawo kuti tiedze kupoterawo nekuunion yedu. Vauyawo vakataurawo zvavataura kuvashandi, vakambonotaurawo nevakuru ne-HR office yedu, and we all denied kusaina mapapers iwayo tichiti hazvisi kubvumirana nazvo. Dai paitwa imwe resolution.
Saka vashandi vese vabatana kuti hatisaine mapepa acho.
Hongu vashandi vese vabatana, vanga vachiaffectwa vese vabatana.
Gibbs, I think you heard what Mr. Moyo is saying there. He's saying that this came as a shock to the workers because some of them have loans from banks, funeral policies and all that. Their families, Mr. Moyo is a father of 3, and they're saying this is something really difficult for him and his family.
Mr. Spanda, I guess you can hear some of these sad stories. What is your advice? You are a labor expert here.
It's like they rightly say, it's actually a sad moment for the country's labor relations. And the answer really lies in quick engagement between the three parties to find a solution. But unfortunately, as the parties talk, the damage is actually going to continue. And there's really not much the workers can do at the moment. Because they are now at the mercy of the employers. Fine, some are trying to say fine, instead of terminating us on notice, we see that the company is struggling, can you put us on short time and things like that. But employers as well, the other challenge that is there is that some employers are very desperate to get rid of the labor, and they are saying in the event the law changes, let the law find me on the other side of the bridge. And the other side of the bridge, unfortunately, is the cruel process of actually getting rid of the workers on notice. I cannot see any other way for the workers other than a quick engagement at the highest level, and then maybe if the presidential measures are actually applicable, the presidential powers are actually applicable, then they could actually be applicable even if it's for a short period, to allow the Labor Act to actually be worked upon and be put into law, which will actually also address this particular issue. Because remember, the process of actually amending an act is not an overnight process. It goes through committees, it goes through the two houses in Parliament, it eventually goes to the President. And when all those processes are gone, it could be 4 or 5 months from now. And in that kind of period, there will be a lot of damage. And a lot of damage in terms of actually workers losing jobs. In fact, at the end of the day, it leaves the nation with a very weak workforce, incapable of making meaningful contribution to the organizations that the workers work for. Even up to director level, I cannot see an MD actually having a robust discussion with the board of directors as well, because the next day you'll be without a job. But so basically, it has got a negative ripple effect on the whole economy, because no robust discussion of any issue that helps the economy can actually be driven from now. And the workers that are thrown out into the streets actually will increase our unemployment levels. It's just going to be very difficult.
Thank you so much. Of course, we also have several messages on WhatsApp. People are writing. The first one, Admire Sibia, says, my view on job termination, it's quite unbecoming that more and more workers are losing their jobs under the leadership of the government, which lied that it is going to create millions of jobs. That madness, terminations from jobs should be stopped immediately. Maxwell says, may hell fall upon the Supreme Court judge. Amen. How can he be inhuman to put such a barbaric judgment? Does he know the importance of working, or has he been fired anyway? Again, I say, may hell fall upon the Supreme Court judge. Amen. I don't know, Gibbs, but the Supreme Court judges are there to interpret the law.
That's
I think
right.
The parliamentarians have the duty of making sure that they perfect that law if there are problems. Isaac says it's really very bad. During election time, the government of Mr. Mugabe promised 2 million jobs, which they failed to produce. Now they're introducing these laws which do not protect the remaining workers. Jerry says the ruling is not free and fair. People will be abused by employers. Something must be done as soon as possible. Alfred says it is a judgment befitting our shallow, myopic bench appointed and serving at the benevolence of Emperor Robert Gabriel Mugabe. Bozolo says justice must be seen to be in the interest of the public rather than against such interests. Interpretation of the law should not cause high uncertainty and its attendant turmoil, but political stability and predictability. Otherwise, the utility of institutions of justice is negated. And of course, Joel says the Supreme Court ruling is a shame. All Zimbabwean workers around the country are now being affected, Gibbs. And we have a caller.
Yeah,
Makandire, Makadiva Makandire.
Yeah,
Namba yacho inenge kuti netse Gibbs.
What's well nje usibanda ngesintu baba sibanda ungaxwayisa ke uthini nxa ungatshela izisebenzi?
Baba dube kuzima ukuxwayisa izisebenzi ukuthi ungathi zibambe lokho kumbe zibambe lokhuyana. Into esinkulu lapha ukuthi uma izisebenzi zisemsebenzini sezihlezi ogatsheni nje njengenyoni ukuthi azikwazi ukuthi umfana werekene angafika nini azesichaya. Lola lo usesebenzela enanzelela umsebenzi wakhe. Njengoba ngichilo ngikhuluma ngesilungu ukuthi nxa kuvele sekunje okungcono ukuqala indlela yokubona ukuthi igodi leli lingagcitshelwa njani. Siyavuma ukuthi hayi lapho liyagcitshelwa khona abaningi babe sebeka bawela ubaba buhlungu nje wavele abantu sebevele baqalisa ukuwela kuleli godi. But esezikukhalela ukuthi ligcitshelwe masinya kungakaweli abanjani abaningi. And ama unions kasukume masinye aphuthume akhulume labaqhathi akhulume lokhulumende ngalinto ukuthi hayi kungaba kuyikunceda ama-company ama-individual ukuthi ubuhlungu lobo ababuthweleyo bama-salary arrears buphele. But uncedo lwakhona ngolwesikhathi esifitshane njalo uncedo lwakhona lubulala abanye abantu. Kudingwe indlela yokuthi into le ilungiswe ngesiphangiphangi. Inxa kudingakala ukuthi umkhokheli welizwe ayecela ukuthi afake umthetho othi hayi okwesikhathi esifitshane kusalungisa umthetho welabor. Mina ngithi le into kayime nxa ukuthi umthetho uyakuvumela khonokho ukuthi mina ngangawukhangelisisi lo mthetho. Nxa ukuvumela khonokho kwenziwe khonokho. Engubonayo kathesi hayi isebenzi segcekeni.
Yeah, but ngibuza ngesikhiwa khona Mr. Spanda, that law has been there for years. So why now?
Right, the law has been there for years. Ungakhangela bakhona abake.
So let's take a break. Let's take a break on that note. Then we're coming back to you.
Okay, then.
And va makandire rambai muri parunhare va moyo rambai futi tichangoti taurei nemi zvishoma muchidimbu tichionekana nevateereri. For our radio listeners, unfortunately it ends here, but the good news is we are streaming live. So go to www.voazimbabwe.com and press on Live Talk. This is Blessing Zulu.
And I'm Gibbs Dube saying stay tuned.
For those of you who are just joining us, good evening, and this is Studio 7 Live Talk. And tonight on Live Talk, we are talking about the Supreme Court ruling on Friday that actually gave employers powers to fire employees after giving them only 3 months notice. And of course, the same judgment says that workers can actually be fired without any terminal benefits. And companies, according to labor, have been firing workers since Friday. And by our own accounting, about 1,350 workers or more have actually lost their jobs. They have massive job cuts that are going on. And one company alone, Sino-Zimbabwe joint venture between Zimbabwe and China, today that company retrenched 400 workers. Gibbs.
And our guest tonight, Mr. Maxwell Moyo, who used to work at Sino-Zimbabwe. He lost his job today. And then we've got Mr. Davis and Mr. Spanda, who is a labor expert based in Bulawayo. And if you wish to join the show right now, phone us directly at this number, 001-202-619-2077, and we'll call you back. That number again, 001-202-619-2077. Ye kulaba basana kusiqhuma nasi nombolo nxa lifuna ukuthi lingene kuhlelo lamhla sikhulume ngalokho okwehlele izisebenzi ithi 001-202-619-2077. Yeah, Mr. Span, I actually asked you a question about the existence of that law, the labor law that says you can fire workers at any time. So tell us a bit about it.
Right. The law has been there for a very long time, but nobody has actually used a toothpick to actually carefully look at it and apply it the way it was applied. Mm-hmm. You'll first of all recognize that the way that case was actually argued at the Supreme Court could have been argued differently and could have produced different results. It was the way the case was argued that actually brought the results that we see today. Mm-hmm. For example, had the parties gone to the Supreme Court to ask the Supreme Court whether what the employer had done was retrenchment or not, and if it was retrenchment, the employer be ordered to follow the retrenchment rules, the answer could have come out differently from the Supreme Court. But somebody went merely to ask the Supreme Court whether the provisions of Section 4A were ousted by Section 12B of the Act, which is discipline procedures. Mm-hmm. And the Supreme Court merely simply said, no, the discipline procedures are merely one form of termination. And as a result, I do not fault the reasoning of the Supreme Court there. Your question is, this has been there for a while. A number of employers have thought through that route. Mm. But one, going to the Supreme Court is very expensive. And if you have many employees that you are retrenching, very few consultants and lawyers would actually advise the employer to actually go through the route of challenging and going right up to the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. Because in the event the case is lost, the cost to the employer is horrendous, because the workers will be deemed will be deemed reinstated, and the process starts afresh 3-4 years down the line, which means you have to pay all those salaries. Mm-hmm. So my view is that because the numbers that were involved were few, that particular employer was willing actually to take that route, and also because the waiting time the waiting time between handling the case internally, the labor court and the Supreme Court has now been largely narrowed. The employer was actually willing to actually take the risk. But I do believe that the largest contributing factor to the whole thing is the way the matter was actually argued at the Supreme Court. If it had been argued, because the Supreme Court was merely asked to actually say, have these provisions of Section 12B ousted 4A. It never went into the termination of the two employees. Mm-hmm. So that obviously made the matter difficult for the employees. I would say when the matter was argued, I don't think the consequences of losing the case were considered, because if they were considered, the argument should have included the question of whether what the employer did at the time was retrenchment or not. There is a strong chance that the Supreme Court could have ruled to say, given the facts before us, yes, this was retrenchment, then the employer would have been ordered to follow the retrenchment route. We might not have actually gone this far. But now that this has happened, I think those arguments are now just academic.
Okay, thank you very much, and stay on the line.
Regai tidzokere kuna vamoyo zvakare. Vamoyo tichitaura kuti mati mune mhuri mune zvamanga makarongawo muupenyu, saka maakuita sei manje nezvaitika izvo?
Parizvino izvi so far tichakabatwa nechidzimira hatisati zvakubhenefika mupfungwa dzedu kuti zvatoitika and hatisati taane pekutangira, tichiri kungodzungaira sofa zvekuti hatina kana pekubata.
Saka vashandi vakawanda vanogara kupi?
Vashandi vakawanda vanga vari vachigara munana Hopely momo vachirojawo muzvidzimba zvemuHopely, vamwewo ndo vaibvawo kune mamwe malocation, asi vazhinji vacho they were just coming from Hopely area iyoyo.
Saka mungaziva here kuti pane vangani vasara?
It's approximately 70 something, because ayanga ari macasual workers ndo vanzi vane macontracts avo ari kuperawo munana September, ndo vanzi ndini you are going to remain muchisevenza kujina donje.
Saka vari kuti vari kuvhara kambani here kana kuti vanenge vangotsvaga vanenge vachishanda vachidzokera macasual workers?
Information maliki yange akuita machinese teachers anga achishanda nemaworkers anga achiti vese vanga vachishanda zvakanaka nesu tichavafonera kuti vadzoke asi nenge makusaina ari macontracts. Nyaya yavari kurwisa kubvisa mapermanent workers so that they can escape from the benefit, the issue of benefits iyoyo.
Aiwa, tinokutendai vamoyo nekupinda muchirongwa chedu chanhasi.
Tinotenda nekubata nyaya dzakadai.
Aiwa, tinotenda zvikuru, ticharamba tichikufonera tichinzwa kuti zviri kufamba sei.
Tinogamuchira.
Tinotenda zvikuru. Gibbs, tine mumwe muteereri vamakandire, makadii? Vamakandire? Vamakandire muripo here parunhare? Panenge paita dambudziko.
Iye kuyahlupa isikesizwe umnumzana uBernard kona ngaleke egokwe. Baba Bernard ungawutshona njani? Mnumzana Bernard usakhona yini mnumzana kona apha ecingweni? Yes, kungani amabhathani ethu alunywe yisambani mfowethu. Yasazi isambani is an end pair, which means sikhangelwe sibhekwe kubi lapha. Sibuye kuye baba khonapho Sibanda. Maybe you can pose another question to Sibanda.
And Mr. Sibanda, I think you heard what Mr. Moyo said there, the former Sino Zim worker. He said that it appears the companies are now like retrenching all the permanent employees, obviously, because he is alleging they don't want to pay them their benefits, and they are now engaging them on a contract basis. Does this explain why probably labor is accusing business of going on this overkill, which to many is tantamount, Gibbs, to actually killing a fly on your friend's forehead using an axe or a machete?
Certainly.
Is this development surprising you, Mr. Moyo, that Mr. Sibanda, rather, that workers are now being engaged as contract workers?
No, not at all. You see, when such a judgment comes out and you have employers who have actually lived with retrenchment rules for a very long time, which they believed are unfair, they could not actually flexibly drop and pick labor, and an opportunity arises, they tend to look at all the things that they consider as costs. And unfortunately, one of the things some employers have always cried about is permanent employees, because of the benefits and the costs and the retrenchment route. You will recognize that the retrenchment route has not been extinguished by this judgment. There are some cases that very well qualify for retrenchment. So my thinking is that some employers are saying, in the event I get to a point where I have to get rid of labor, it's cheaper to get rid of employees on fixed-term contract. So they are now seizing the opportunity to actually terminate all the permanent contract employees and then put the workers on fixed-term contract, which obviously means that in the event they get into hardships which ordinarily would have actually required retrenchment, they are now out of the retrenchment route and they are now on fixed-term contract. But I would want to say such moves are also risky because you still have workers who can actually litigate. And the courts will look at the real intention of the employer in these cases. And they might actually order reinstatement of the workers. I think some employers are actually going on an overkill, and they are doing it in a very reckless manner, not realizing that a number of other laws that actually protect workers are still in force. It might be costly for workers to actually litigate to restore their dignity, but it could actually long-term prove very costly for some employers what they are doing. For example, you can't terminate an employee today and bring him back in a few days and say he's on fixed term. My view is that the courts might actually frown on that and order that the employee be restored to his original position.
Mr. Sibanda, we just want to take a caller quickly. Gibbs,
yes, lo mnumzana Bernard C osekokwe. Baba Bernard kunjani? Uyasizwa kuhle baba Bernard? Kungazana ama-line ethu lapha angani kahambe kuhle.
But we have two more guests. First, we have the former president of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, Mr. Callisto Jokonya. Mr. Jokonya, good evening.
Good evening to you. I'm now actually the vice chairman of the vice president of MCOS.
Oh, vice president of MCOS, Employers Confederation of Zimbabwe.
I can help. Yes, and I've been listening, very attentively too.
Yes, you can go ahead. What is your comment on what Mr. Sibanda has said? Is it true that employers are just firing employees willy-nilly? What's happening?
Yeah, I think what Mr. Sibanda is saying probably may be said differently. What the judgment that has been was handed down by the Supreme Court is only just it's been always in the Act from 1985 when this Labor Act came into effect. So it was only that there was never anyone bold enough to use that part of the legislation. And what the Supreme Court has done is just to highlight that it does exist. It's another avenue of terminating. In fact, it is the only portion in the Labor Act that recognizes the contractual obligation between an employer and an employee. And it's the one that puts us at equal footing. The rest of the legislation, which we have been using, has been too costly, and it has caused closures of companies. It has caused what one would call, it has developed the workers to become lazy. It has become disobedience in an organization. So in itself, it became protective, but it is destroying the economy. And one cannot say this is something that we support. So to us really, I don't think an employer, a genuine employer, would want to recruit an employee in order to fire them tomorrow. The reason why you find today it looks like more people are being asked to go is because the companies themselves have been under lock and key for a long time. So in order to save the company, you have to terminate a few employees. And then when you have got the company that are running efficiently, you can always recruit those people, come back into the jobs. So, and one has to look at that. It would look as if the employer has become a mercenary attitude. The answer is no. The employer is saying, if I don't do that, it means I'm now going to close the company. And we have had more closure than the existing companies. We've had companies in huge losses. In fact, the parastatal issue is a typical case where you have You just begin to see. So when we say this affects, it also even affects the senior management or even the chief executive. He's also an employee. He will have to, if he's not delivering the service, and then he may equally be, his contract may be terminated. And that's the picture. The problem is everybody who talk about this want to talk about the grassroots worker. No. Management will be asked to leave as well. Right? It even goes to government. Government can do the same thing if they find that they've got employees who are not working. If they've got politicians, you can see there's a reshuffling left, right, and center. When they find somebody is not performing, the same must happen. It means the economy will take off. The benefits of what this law has done, three things. You are going to have productivity increase. You are going to have foreign investors coming to the country. And you are going to have better working relationship between employer and employee. The cake increases.
Mr. Jokonya, let me bring in Mr. Kenya's Shamyarira, the president of the Zimbabwe Federation of Trade Unions, or ZFTU. Mr. Shamyarira, do you agree with Mr. Jokonya's assessment?
Yes, thank you. Firstly, I'm the Secretary General of ZFTU.
Secretary General, I promoted you.
Partly I would agree, partly I would not agree. I'm just getting in now. But maybe if I can say, I think this Supreme Court judge judgment has jettisoned fairness in balancing the judgment in this case in favor of strict interpretation of the statute and common law. But you find out that the judgment is premised on the statute, which is the Labour Relations Act, which clearly stipulates that the Labour Act must be interpreted in a manner that advances social justice and democracy. In other words, where you don't have social justice and democracy, then these objectives must always take precedence in any judgment. But given this now, you will find that the judge, president, the chief judge, went on to say, yes, there is a void which needs to be done. Yes, you are in the process of coming up with a new labor bill, which will correct that void, which has been left silently. But now, our assessment as ZFT is that the judgment in itself is just a simple common judgment, which has left out these other fundamental objectives that I've alluded to. But now, the employer side, the predatory capitalists, as I've always said, they are now taking this, you see, to use this judgment as a conspiracy theory in order to frustrate their always their ego that they always wanted to have a cheap labor where they have got the free for hiring and firing willy-nilly. Because this is not the only judgment that we have had since independence, where employers have been given the precedent to proceed with determination. But never in the history of this country that we have seen so much moratorium of job losses premised on one judgment. So you see, that's the conspiracy part of it that we are seeing. It is actually now being used by these predatory capitalists for other ulterior agendas that is behind, that was even behind the thinking of the judges. Firstly, this judgment is now being used by these so-called captain of industry who are just stage managing companies here at the end of just getting those royalties from the shareholders. And those shareholders, they don't want the current sitting government. They are now using this as a conduit and as a smokescreen cover to make sure that the workers go in the streets. They are causing mutiny and rage to fight this government. Because why this issue was done at Zua Petroleum. That's where this judgment was passed. Why is it now cascading to Sinozim? Why is it cascading to Pelham? The merits is the same. The merits are not intelligent. You see, now we are now having these people now, they are saying this is the time now to strike. But let me warn all those companies. That's why we have asked for the Presidential Temporary Measures Act to make sure that this is stifled once and for all. And the Presidential Temporary Measures Act is going to act in retrospect in order to compensate the already casualties that are in the limelight. So what we are going to do now, all companies, all workers, we are agitating them through our appeals that they must refuse to vacate those premises. And if the employers continue to say we are using this judgment, they must start from the top. We must see chief executive officers getting the same marching orders, just like other general workers.
Thank you, Mr. Shamera. Thank you, Mr. Shamera. Gibbs?
Yeah, let's go back to Mr. Spanda. Mr. Spanda, I think you heard these two gentlemen. They're even touching on social, justice and all those kind of things. But we know that social justice is actually an enemy of employers, and that doesn't, carry well with most companies. So at the end of the day, what can you say about what these two guys are saying?
First of all, I would like to say what the issues raised by Mr. Jokonya, I think there was convergence on a number of them. It is true, which I actually raised earlier on, that a lot of employers, businesses have actually been bleeding as a result of the complex retrenchment processes that we have. But the question that arises is what the employers are doing the best tool. If we knew that after some time this will stabilize and employers will start picking labor again when their business stabilizes, we would then say maybe it's a painful thing that we all as a nation have to go through. But I don't think there are guarantees that these organizations that are now terminating employees on notice, all of them are doing it with good intentions. If it is done with good intentions and to pick labor tomorrow, yes, we would actually say fine. It's a pain that the nation can take. But if you look at some of the things that have actually been happening, it defies logic to actually come to a conclusion that the terminations actually are intended to only serve the business. There's no doubt that there are so many businesses that should have actually retrenched long back. If you look at local authorities, if you look at parastatals, if you look at Bulawayo in Belmont, a lot of businesses went under simply because they could not actually be allowed to retrench and they could not afford to retrench. Had a window like this been there, maybe long back, people would say maybe these companies would have survived. But this is now only talking about something that is long gone. But as where we stand now, we are saying the law is actually disadvantaging employees, and employers and labor have to engage and find a solution to the problem. Yes, there are issues of foreign investors coming in, but it's not always that foreign investors come in and actually add value into a country. There are a lot of other economic fundamentals we have to deal with as a nation. That's how I actually see it. And then there was a question that was actually raised. There was an issue that is being raised in that the presidential measures have to come in, which I also raised. Again, I don't think it's just a question of just asking the president to bring this in. We needed to have actually assessed and said, what is the real impact on the ground? Are these people who are getting rid of labor genuinely needing it or abusing it? If they are abusing it, how are they abusing it? So that the measures that come in do not disadvantage those who genuinely need to actually terminate on notice. I think it still has to be done in a very fair manner and also stop the abuse that is actually occurring at the moment. That's how I actually see it.
Thank you very much, Baba Span.
Thank you so much. Let's bring in Mr. Jokonya. Mr. Jokonya, you heard what Mr. Shamyer said about the retrenchments, that maybe some of them have other motives other than labor.
Yeah, I thank you very much, Blessing. I don't think I want to engage in that thinking. Comrade Shamyarira knows my stance very well, and it's somebody I know very well. I will not believe that I, as a businessman, I would recruit in order to fire people. Then it means I no longer want to run a business. I think that would not be the right way. But the comment I just want to make, which I find a little bit difficult to comprehend, is the fact that the unions are asking for a presidential decree to interfere with the Supreme Court judgment. I think let's just come a little bit and look at it. I don't even want our president to act outside the law. Our president is the one who has put that the law and the judges. And these are five learned judges who have looked at the issue and they've seen what it means. And I would do for anyone to rush and say, now let's get a presidential decree. In my opinion, I think you need to look at the whole law, because I'm not a lawyer, but I would think you need also to look at the rights of a company. A company is a legal person, and it cannot be the only one that has been taking the caning from 1985 to 2015. It has been pained all the time, and they've realized that the law has to be applied fairly, and this is what has happened. But our current and new constitution does pronounce the rights of a company, the rights of an employee, the rights of an employer. So all those things are covered, and you really don't. I don't think even the government has got that appetite to do such an act. If they do that, that's fine, because they're in authority, but it may have more damage than what is intended. This issue that we have here for this week, it is going to settle out in the next week. Everything will be back to square one. Everybody now working. The workers will be now working hard, and productivity is going to increase, and investors are going to flock into this country.
Let's bring in Mr. Shamyarira there. Mr. Shamyarira, do you agree?
Let's all expect said. You see, this issue of this judgment, I'm telling you, it's just used as a smoke screen cover. Look, since the 17th to date, we now have almost 2,000 redundant workers. You get the point? And this is done not on the needy, but on the greedy and on pretentious intent that are rooted on making sure that the people that are being fired are giving gain to those that have already been always gaining at the expense of the masses. It is going to benefit a few elites, you see, a peak. Because right now, if you look at the companies that are already replacing people, the management will still remain there, and they will still continue to buy the Prados, whatever high-tech mix that they go. You get the point. So there is no need for that, but it is actually to cause commotion. This is why we are clamoring that the only person who can do this is the head of state, because this has been done by the judiciary, which is part of the arms of the state. And this is the High Court order, this is Supreme Court order, which can only be reviewed by a court. It's the Constitutional Court. But the Constitutional Court can only be guaranteed if there are any constitutional connotations in that.
Mr. Shamyarira, thank you so much. Unfortunately, our time has run out, but we want to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Kenias Shamyarira, Secretary General, Zimbabwe Federation of Trade Unions, Mr. Maxwell Moyo, a retrenched worker at Sino Zim, Mr. Kalisto Jokonya, past president of CZI, now, according to him, the vice president of the Employers Confederation of Zimbabwe, and also Mr. Davis Ndumiso Sibanda, labor expert based in Bulawayo. We want to thank our viewers, our callers, and of course our team behind the scenes, our engineers and producers. Signing off, this is yours truly, Blessing Zulu.
Elom Gibbs Dube saying good night.